I was just trying to enjoy a quiet weekend at my cabin, grilling some burgers. Hanging out with a couple friends. Nothing wild when things took a turn I never expected. Out of nowhere, two men in tactical gear showed up at the edge of my property. No sirens, no warning, just two guys claiming they were with law enforcement. They didn't show badges, didn't give names, just started demanding I shut down the BBQ, saying I was violating some HOA rules. That was the first red flag. See, my cabin isn't even part of a homeowners association. I bought that land specifically to avoid all that drama. At first, I thought maybe they were confused or had the wrong address. But the way they act aggressive, like they were trying to intimidate me, didn't sit right. They kept pushing. Walking toward my guests, telling people to disperse like it was some kind of raid. I stayed calm, told them they had no authority here, and that's when things really started to unravel. My neighbor across the creek, who happens to be a retired FBI agent, saw what was going on and called in a report. Within minutes, everything flipped. Turns out, these weren't real cops. They weren't from any agency at all. They were sent by the local HOA board, trying to strong-arm me off my own land for reasons I still don't fully understand. But they picked the wrong day and the wrong cabin. What they didn't know was that a federal task force had already been monitoring shady activity in the area tied to impersonation and local corruption. The minute those fake officers crossed onto my property, it became a federal issue, and that's when the real agents showed up. What happened next was something I'll never forget. It went from a peaceful barbecue to a federal sting operation in seconds. But how deep did this go? And why was the HOA so desperate to get me out of there? Let's just say the truth behind it is way more twisted than I ever imagined. After everything calmed down just enough to breathe, I started putting the pieces together. See, this wasn't the first time the HOA had tried something weird with me. A few months back, I got a letter in the mail saying I was in violation of some covenant codes for a property that's miles outside their jurisdiction. I ignored it, thinking it was a mistake. Then came the passive-aggressive visits. A guy in a polo shirt with a clipboard would show up, taking pictures of my driveway, asking strange questions about how long I planned to stay there. I brushed it off. I figured maybe they were just nosy or bored. But now, this thing with the fake officers. It was too organized to be random. I started digging, asking around town, checking public records. Turns out, this HOAF, you can even call it, that has a long history of overreach. They've pushed out a handful of landowners in the past few years, buying up empty lots and cabins through shell companies. Some neighbors said they'd been harassed into selling. Others just disappeared from the area. No explanation. Property snapped up right after they left. I never paid it much attention before. But now, I was starting to connect the dots. Even stranger, the two imposters who showed up at my cabin, no IDs, no digital footprint, nothing. It's like they didn't exist. The FBI wasn't saying much, but I could tell they were taking it seriously. One of the agents told me off the record that my place might have been marked months ago for what he wouldn't say. But the look in his eyes said enough. This wasn't just about a BBQ or property lines. Something bigger was going on. Meanwhile, back in town, the HOA board had suddenly gone quiet. Meetings were canceled, phone numbers disconnected, and one of the main guys, Mark Larison, the so-called president, hadn't been seen in days. People were whispering, acting nervous, like they knew more than they were letting on. And with the FBI still sticking around, I knew this wasn't over. If anything, it was just getting started. A couple days after the incident, I got a knock at my door just after sundown. It was Claire, one of the longtime residents from the other side of the lake. She looked nervous, like she was debating whether to even say what she came to say. After a long pause, she told me something I wasn't expecting. She used to be part of the HOA board. Years ago, before things got shady, according to her, It used to be a simple group, just neighbors trying to keep the roads clear and split the cost of security cameras. But then new people moved in, bought up several lots at once, and started pushing others out with legal threats, zoning complaints, and quiet intimidation. That's when Claire quit. She said it started to feel like they were working off some hidden agenda. They'd go after properties with certain features, ones near the forest line, places with old wells or underground access. Mine checked all the boxes. I asked her if she knew why, but she just shook her head and said, "Whatever it is. It's not about keeping the neighborhood nice." Before she left, she slipped me a worn-out flash drive. "If anything happens to me, look at this," she said. That was the last time I saw her. Meanwhile, the FBI presence around the area grew, but they kept to themselves. I overheard agents asking questions about a defunct mining claim not far from my property, one that hadn't been touched in decades. That raised more questions. Why would a homeowners association care about an abandoned mine? Less, maybe, it wasn't abandoned. I remembered something my grandfather told me when he first gave me the cabin, were stories about tunnels running beneath the hills, used back in the Prohibition days. Rumors, mostly. But now I wasn't so sure. To make things weirder, one of my game cams caught movement late one night. 3 people in dark clothing moving fast through the trees near the back of my land. They didn't trip any alarms, didn't break anything, just passed through. I sent the footage to the agents. They didn't say much, but I could tell they knew more than they were letting on. A week later, everything felt like it was closing in. The forest around my cabin, usually peaceful and still, now felt watched. I'd hear branches cracking late at night, shadows moving just beyond the porch light. Even my dog, who never barked at wildlife, started growling at nothing. I kept the flash drive Claire gave me hidden in a tool drawer until I finally got the nerve to open it. What I found nearly made my stomach drop. The folder was full of old scanned documents, land surveys, deed transfers, emails between board members, and a map. The map had red marks circling certain properties, including mine, with notes like entry point and tunnel access confirmed. One document listed equipment, purchases, drills, generators. Heavy gear you wouldn't need for trimming trees or repairing fences. It was like the HOA was running a covert operation under the cover of neighborhood regulations. I tried calling Claire, Tia, but her number was disconnected. I drove past her place, and the house looked empty. Lights off, blinds drawn, mailbox overflowing. She was gone. Whether she left on her own or was made to disappear, couldn't tell. I turned the flash drive over to the agents, and for the first time, they didn't act neutral. One of them, Agent Hall, pulled me aside and said quietly, "You need to be somewhere safe tonight, off property. Don't sleep here." When I asked why, he just said, "We've stirred up something bigger than we thought." I packed a bag, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. This was my land, my family's cabin, and now I was caught in something that felt way beyond a land dispute. Around 2 a.m., just as I was thinking of heading into town, I saw headlights coming down the old fire road slow, creeping, no engine noise. I turned off all the lights, grabbed my flashlight, and stayed low. I counted 3 vehicles, no plates, just dark SUVs with tinted windows. They parked at the edge of the woods, and figures got out. No one knocked. They just stood there, waiting, watching. That's when I knew whatever was about to happen, it was already in motion. I stayed crouched in the dark, barely breathing, as those figures stood near the tree line, like they were waiting for a signal. I counted 5 of them now, all dressed in black, carrying what looked like tool bags or maybe gear, hard to tell from that distance. I texted Agent Hall, no response, no cell signal either. My dog, Moose, let out a low growl but didn't bark, almost like he knew this wasn't the time. That's when I noticed something strange. The SUVs had no tire tracks. I'd checked that dirt road earlier in the day. It was clear. How did they get in without leaving a trace? I slowly made my way to the back of the cabin, flashlight off, and slipped out through the side woods. I knew the terrain better than anyone and had set up trail cams all over months ago. I needed to know who these people were and why they were just standing there. As I circled wide and got closer from behind, I caught a voice, low, muffled. They weren't waiting. They were preparing. I heard one of them say, "We breach in 5. Make sure the lower access is clear." Lower access. That's when it hit me, the cellar. There's a hatch under my cabin, one I never paid much attention to. Old wood, probably sealed for decades. My grandfather always said it was just storage, but I'd never actually opened it. I thought it was nothing. Apparently, I was wrong. Just as I was turning back to race home, I heard a thud, then another. They weren't coming through the front, they were going under, digging, breaking in from below. I sprinted back through. The tree's heart pounding, trying to figure out how they even knew about the cellar. And that's when I saw one of my trail cams ripped clean off its post, still blinking like it was transmitting. They'd been watching me too. I wasn't just a target. I was part of something they'd planned long before I ever fired up that barbecue. And whatever